Hey guys, Lost here. How are you doing? How have you been? Today we are talking about Cyberpunk 2077 and more importantly, my honest review of the game so far. Basically, the point is if my friend were to come up and ask me, hey, have you played the new Cyberpunk game? What's it like? This would be my response to them in somewhat of a lengthy summary. Keep in mind, I have not listened to any other reviews. I also have not read any reviews, so everything I say in this video is completely original from my own thoughts and interpretations of the game. And other than the occasional meme about the poor optimization issues, this is all coming from me. First off, if you don't know what Cyberpunk 2077 is, it is a first-person shooter RPG set in the future year of 2077 in a dystopian city called Night City in a fragmented United States where technology has gone rampant, corporations are now in supreme control, and any form of formal government no longer exists. So other than that, I'm just going to assume you kind of know what the idea of the game is. So with that, let's just get into it. So let's talk about the elephant in the room here and hopefully get the biggest negative aspect out of the way, and that is the optimization. It is subpar at best. To be honest, I would have come up to that conclusion on my own. Now, I have a pretty good rig, so I can run most of the game around 60 frames per second on medium settings. However, I can assure you that I am equally as frustrated as many of you. I don't know what on earth it is about modern $70 massive titles that utterly refuse to be optimized on launch. Unfortunately, Cyberpunk 2077 has also succumbed to that issue. No matter how many times I reconfigure the settings of the game, I can't quite get the clarity and sharpness of the game that I would like. Textures fail to render more often than I would care for, and that goes for street signs, cars especially, buildings, and occasionally weapons in your hand, but also some of the characters on the street as well. And even though I can get slightly higher clarity with the settings, the frames still hover around 40 to 60 frames. And again, I have a pretty decent PC build. The specs will be in the description. There are currently a few mods out there to try and fix it, and I'm even running some of them in the video, but it doesn't quite seem to do it justice. I am confident the devs will fix the game as it progresses, but it is still unfortunate that that is something that has to be addressed in the first place. Fortunately, it doesn't seem to have seeped into the cutscenes. All of those seem pretty good for me so far, but when you're out exploring the world, it definitely kind of glares in your face from time to time. Since we are on the topic of the world, let's talk about it. So the map of Night City horizontally is about the same size or maybe a little bit smaller than The Witcher 3, but because it is a city and there's multiple levels and layers to it, you can expect it to be a little bit bigger with a lot more nooks and crannies to explore. I will say Night City is probably the staple of what the Cyberpunk universe is all centered around, and I think they did a pretty good job at purveying this in the game. What really impresses me the most is the fact that every single character you see walking around on the street looks completely unique and original to itself. There are not a lot of doubled up character models. In fact, I've seen almost none so far. This truly shows how hard working the team is and how dedicated they are, the developers, to making this feel like a living and breathing city of its own. Despite it being called Night City, I would not describe it as dead. You can oftentimes hear gunshots in the distance, very real gunshots that you can go and explore and take part in, wars between gangs, etc. One part of the game specifically that I noticed was this nightclub scene that you are watching here now, and just the amount of things that are going on inside the environment when you're there. Every character is again unique and completely different from anybody else, and it's not just a set piece. People are doing things, they're talking, they're laughing, they're drinking, they're dancing. There's even a couch where a bunch of people are experiencing some sort of VR while there's a girl on the end just poking through her phone. It all looks and feels very real. It definitely captures the high energy nightclub scene of Night City very well. Those feelings that I'm describing that the environment gives me, I think is something that Cyberpunk's creator Mike Pondsmith really wanted to hammer home and show in the game, and I think the core elements of that is truly there. Cyberpunk is bright and shiny, there's technology and lights, but it's also dark and dirty, and there's poverty. It's all thrown into a very big mixing bowl of culture and somehow comes out completely unique on the other side. And unlike the real world, he manages to make it work. Now, despite that incredibly unique feel that Cyberpunk portrays, I do think that it still lacks a little bit. There is still an element of grit beneath the neon lights that it doesn't have the ability to really impose all the way on the player. Now, a lot of that has to do with the lighting. I think the nights definitely need to be darker, and the lights should probably stand out more, and there should be fewer of them. Now, I think that is definitely something mods will be able to fix, but so far it's a little bit too colorful and almost happy for my liking. Now, when it comes to the gameplay itself, I think it does itself justice. The gunfights seem very satisfying. The guns have a kick, which I was afraid they might lack. There's plenty of blood, fire, and explosions for all the thrill seekers out there. It has a few basic elements of parkour, some jumping, diving, and sliding, but that's not really a main piece of the game. Driving, like in most FPS RPGs, is definitely not something to write home about. It does its job well, but it is kind of like driving a big boat through the street most of the time. The hard difficulties definitely impose a challenge, and the easy difficulties make it easy. I don't have too much to say since I have not explored every aspect of the game and all of the gear and upgrades yet, but all I can say is I have very few qualms with the gameplay itself. When it comes to player customization and the story, those are definitely strong suits for the game, and yes, you can adjust the size of your genitals. Leveling up allows you to spend points on things like strength and agility. Also, it has its own version of speech, which can influence how your conversations go. Each stat is a set of perks you can spend more points on that will increase weapon damage, increase health, increase sneaking ability, and things like that. Its story, I would say, is probably the strongest part of the game. It definitely has me intrigued. Within the story, visuals, and dialogue, they definitely harness the original vision of Mike Pondsmith's tabletop game, where characters often use slang that are completely unique to the world and story itself, where it'll probably mostly go over people's heads if you don't have at least some idea of where the lore comes from. To make a long story short, I would absolutely recommend this game. Now, this could be just because I'm a huge fan of the genre and I've done quite a bit of research on the lore itself, so now I'm invested, but hey, you don't have to take my word for it. Hopefully this short review gave you a wholesome first glance at what Cyberpunk has to offer. Unfortunately, there are no major mods out for the game yet since it's only 4 days old. Otherwise, I would have made a mod video already. Anyways, we are getting to the end, so thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed. Subscribe for more content like this, and I will see you guys later.